it's had its spray. It's very interesting how the light actually changes. I don't know quite what that will look like through my camera and on your screen, but I did notice earlier in the day that sort of side light, the yellowish light, is making it brown. Under bright direct light, it's getting the dusty grey. So I covered it in entirety, and I've just patched up some little faults and little bare areas that were apparent. You can see that, and I've just decided that even though I'm pleased with the look of it, it's not going to be enough. I'm going to have to go over the entire surface again. Ho hum. I've finished dry brushing the roof with, it's had 2 layers of the light grey, and then it's had a sort of light patchy touch with an even lighter grey. I'm not sure if that's made any difference, but that's sort of gone on some of the high spots. And then in select places, like under the Senior Wizard's cruck framed house and in some of the folds, there's a spray with a little green added in, areas where it might go a little bit mossy. I'm still half tempted to go and put some little spots of dark green in somewhere. But it just occurred to me when I got to that stage and looking at it and thinking, finally, actually, the building, which is to say the structure, is finished. What remains is an awful lot of detailing. So I need to put the finial in. I haven't decided on whether or not there's going to be a telescope sticking out of the tower. The big task is these 2 ends, this end here and the end on the other end of the right angle, which are going to be the interiors of buildings that were stripped away. That's the biggest task of what remains, I think, because there's still quite a lot of design to go in there. There's a lot of touching up, just going over all the black and the white and finding areas where my brushwork wasn't as hot as it should have been. Then there's some general weathering with the airbrush, particularly around the lower levels. A lot more work to be done on the rock underneath. I still can't quite get that the way I want it. Somehow the sort of colours and the hint of stratigraphy isn't right. There's the washing line. There's the sign of the inn itself, which has got to be constructed to go on the other corner, and little holes and bits of damage and other little ideas that I've had, like maybe putting in some swifts nests or something, house martins nests. And I think what I need to do now really is stop. There's a time to stop. I think I need to stop and make a written list, because even as I'm talking to you now, I realise I'm freewheeling, and there's also going to be a book, or a booklet perhaps, which is going to be the story, the sort of written description of the whole thing. And I really think at this point I need to sort of start making a long to-do list, and then starting to think about what tasks can be knocked off. His cruck-framed cottage was supposed to be really rustic and tumbled down, even more so than the rest of the building. But then I saw a picture of a red door, and it wasn't actually this one. I've lost the picture that I saw, but it was similar to that. It was an even older door than that, but it was painted red with the most fabulous ironwork. So I thought, well, if you were a 200-year-old arch wizard and you wanted a red door, you'd have one, wouldn't you? Because all the best people have bright bright red front doors. So I've been sitting here for a while, approximating that, ready for a bit of paint almost. I'm about to add some soil, but I thought I'd better key it first. PVA has this very strange behaviour sometimes of looking like it's starting to go off and settle, dry firstly by forming a skin, but then suddenly running. I've noticed that before. It's a very strange thing. It might be something to do with the heat of the room. I don't know. There wasn't a bottle of glue that was at room temperature, but anyway, that's just a key. When that's dried, I shall mix up some horticultural sand and PVA and start pasting it on to form the soil level. Can't find my words as usual. And while that's drying, that's the door almost finished, so I've got to do the tricky bit of drilling the holes and putting the pins in, but I like the look at it. This is going to be the material for the windows of Quondam was his hut, which are there, and I've painted that. It's just a little bit of food packaging with gunmetal coloured enamel, Humbrol enamel pots that I've had for decades. Try to look a little bit like LED lights. I think he might be the one person that's actually got real glass. And I'm going to paint onto the backs of those. That will be the front sides. It's just very unlikely that anybody will see that detail once they're in those tiny holes. I'm going to paint on the back of those though, just some little spots of varnish here and there to make it look like bottle glass, which you used to see, where only small panes could be made, but they were basically rounded glass bottles that were then cut open and folded flat, and some of them were actually left looking like the bottom of the bottle, just for decorative effect. And then those other windows are the ones for the little gable ends. I don't know what I'm going to put in those yet, probably just something to represent parchment. Is the soil going on. It's only a very thin layer, and it's I tried using the tongue depressor as a spatula, but it doesn't really work. The only thing that's doing the job is just sort of finger painting. A lot of it drops off as I go. Hoping it's not too much of it is missing the newspaper, and it's not going to be this colour, but it's just to show a little bit of texture between where the rock starts. I think they've got, this is a medieval town, so they didn't have earth movers. It was originally in a medieval town before it was ripped from the ground, but they didn't have earth movers to strip away all the topsoil. They looked for areas. It's one of the reasons for building on hills, as well as defensive reasons. You built on high ground, the soil layer was thinner because you didn't really have any foundations. So I'm just sort of suggesting a thin layer of soil, and I've realised as I'm doing it that I was going to put one or two plants and weeds in here and there, and that was a sort of late stage job, but I need to think about it now because we'll want to indicate some roots going down into this. So sometimes things you never thought about before only actually come to mind when you're in the making process. And now, because I'm filming with one hand and doing this with the other, I've got to think how I can stop this clip without getting glue on my phone, which will be the first time. I'm going to have to put you down on your face for a moment. Sorry about that. I think it's been about 4 days since my last post. I'm going to have a go at making a medieval cart, and I started thinking about that really. Those are going to be the wheels. Getting a bit distracted, or rather just deliberately distracting myself, because I was getting a bit obsessed about painting this end, which is starting to come on. Still haven't quite solved the problem there. I painted this wall about 5 times with different shades and still not completely happy. These blocks have gone in, which are there's going to be some floor planking from the building that was ripped away there, but I just decided that I couldn't just have planks sticking out with what was underneath. The door, still fiddling and twiddling with that. I decided that there were some little gaps between the planks which I didn't want visible, and the bolts are finally in, so I just need to trim that down slightly and I can put that in place. But the wizard still needs his flower boxes and other things to go on there. This has been done. The soil profile. The reason I want to do the cart is going to be abandoned in the yard area, possibly broken. But I want to use it first on this roadway to actually drag it through some soft putty or something to get some convincing looking road tracks. But yeah, the soil profile has been done, and there are actually 6 different colours of paint going in there to get what a soil profile looks like, which is a top layer of humus, and then where it's beginning to mix in with the subsoil, and then the subsoil, and then bits of breaking off rock, and then eventually the bedrock. And there's a little bonus just in there. I've put a skeleton in a collapsing grave. I wonder if anybody will ever spot that. These are the wheels coming together. They've been cut out, and then they were done in 2 semicircles, and each of the semicircles has been cut in half. One of them actually split, so it was in 5 bits. Then they've been reassembled with glue. A lot of dust, sorry about that. It's partly from all the sanding I've done to get these shapes. And then those are going to be the quarter spokes. There need to be 8 spokes altogether to make them look something like that medieval manuscript drawing. And the next job is to cut those out with the Dremel. Those are going to be the hubs. So there's actually 2 wheels. I did make one mistake of putting the crossbars in those, but in fact that's the back of the wheel, and then it's going to be filled to make it look like a solid thing. And the Dremel is fantastic. I absolutely love my Dremel, but it's a Dremel 3000, and as you can sort of get the general size of it compared to my hand. It's a bit fierce for this job. The speed settings are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and on 2 it's too fast and too powerful really to do that job well, which is why I get problems with sometimes the tongue depressor being quite thin and rather brittle wood, splitting and breaking just when I've almost finished cutting out a small piece. I'd love to know why they numbered them in even numbers, and you can't sort of put it to speed 1. I'd love to be able to do that. I suppose it's a legacy thing. They do make smaller mini drills for this kind of thing, but I don't have one, so I have to carry on with that. Needs must when the devil vomits in your kettle. the gable end is coming on. Fiddling and twiddling and changing little bits. Most of all, I've painted and given a wash to the timbers, which would not be as weather blackened and grease blackened. Don't know if hopefully I've mentioned this before, but the reason that timber framed houses had the sort of the black look in Middle Ages, at least, is because they were covered in lard, and that lard, just cattle grease basically, was smothered onto the oak, and it held a lot of soot, especially when you eventually got to the Industrial Revolution. They often look cleaner these days than they maybe ever did in history. But where the building's been ripped away, you wouldn't see as much blackness. We've got more brown on there. I'm not happy with the colour of it yet. And on the other end, I've done less work on the other end. I've just started thinking about that. To give that some variation difference, I decided I would have the shadow of a staircase on the wall. To make that, I'm going to need a stencil. So that's the beginning of it. What I'll do now is I'll block off some of these and then very carefully cut the staircase template. Now that's a 28mm scale figure, which is 1 to 58 in the other ways of doing scales, and that is the equivalent of an 8-inch stair tread, which is the standard, safe, and fairly conventional, ordinary size of a staircase, 8 inches. You just see the amazing difference between what I'm going to get when I model a to scale staircase, even if it's just the shadow of a staircase, and what you do when you want to make playable gaming terrain. If you're making terrain like you want the inside of a castle wall with steps going up, and you want to stand your figures on those steps, you have to make each tread the size of the base, very nearly, is 25mm, as opposed to 3.5mm, which is what these are. So you're not just out of scale when you're having to do that, you're wildly out of scale. And to make it try and look alright, people then have much higher risers, and the whole thing, if you stop to think about it, is a bit ridiculous. But that's what you have to do when you're trying to make something playable. Fortunately, this outside wall at least doesn't have to be playable. These are the cartwheels with the spokes in, and the next stage is using wood filler to stick that in quite generously in between the spokes, so that it squelches out a little bit over the edges, and then these pieces will be put on top, and then I should, with some little needle files that my daughter bought me for my birthday, and sandpaper, I should be cleaning up, and hope to get an impression of a solid rimmed and solid hubbed cartwheel. Let's see if that works.